everyone. Thanks for joining. We still have a few people who are joining us, so we're going to give it just a few minutes and then we'll get started. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to the TSC monthly webinar series. Our topic today will be what is new in OnBase 23.1, as well as what we learned at CommunityLive 2023. Jack Roberts, the founder of TSC, will be our presenter. Jack has been working with OnBase since the year 2000. And we also have Jack Pompey, who's with TSC. He will be fielding the questions that come through the chat, so feel free to ask those questions. If you aren't currently receiving emails on our monthly webinars, please let us know in the chat and we'll get you added. Also, stay tuned at the end of our presentation for our upcoming webinar topics. If you have any topics of interest around OnBase and Hyland, please let us know, as we'd like to make these monthly webinars a resource for all to learn about new features and products Hyland has to offer. Thanks again to everyone for attending, and we look forward to a great and informative webinar. Jack, if you'd like to get started.
Thanks, Stephanie. All right, hello everyone, good afternoon. So just to give you a quick agenda, what we're going to talk about since 23.1 is out. What does that mean for previous versions of OnBase? Have a quick little brief view about that. Then we're going to talk about what's new in OnBase 23.1, like there's new products out, new module updates, and then platform updates. And then what did we learn from CommunityLive 2023? Okay. Finally, we'll wrap it up with Q&A. So our normal little disclaimer slide of who is TSC. You can see that we were founded in 2011, and we offer all things OnBase. Anything you have around OnBase, other Hyland products, we take care of and make sure that we can be here for you and be a trusted partner throughout. Just a little blurb on who we are and how happy some of our customers are. We're gonna let you go right through that, and then let's start this whole thing off. We should mention that this recording will be available for you once we're done today. It'll be on our YouTube channel tomorrow, and if you've signed up, which you have since you're here, you will get a link to the recording as well. So 23.1 is out. What does that mean for any previous versions of OnBase? First of all, 22.1 is in its final year of active development updates. So that means that you'll still have updates for 22.1 until we get into 24.1. There will be no more development for EP5, only security enhancements, meaning that if IBM determines there's some kind of security flaw, then Hyland will make the necessary updates to EP5 and a new build, but they would no longer have monthly releases like you would see for 22.1. If you're on EP3, as of March 2023, there's no more security updates, and EP3 is now in what's called extended support. A lot of people aren't aware that if you're on an OnBase instance that's more than 2 long-term releases, it is subject to an extended support fee. What does that mean? Basically, if you're, for easy numbers, if you were paying $10,000 annually, you're going to see a little bit increase in that, and it's an encouragement for you to get upgraded to the latest and greatest. Typically, we recommend people upgrade every 2 years just to stay current, so you don't have to incur any of these. Also, with technology changing, sometimes we need to move fast and get in the latest releases that take advantage of the new technology and will help us thrive with our OnBase investment. Jumping right in, new products. There are 3 new products introduced for 23.1 that we're pretty excited about: App Builder, Hyland for Workday Extend, and then Outlook Web Add-in for 365. So what does that mean? App Builder, what is it? It's a new way of building OnBase solutions so that you don't have to push out the entire Unity client or the entire web client. It gives you persona-based views. You can tailor your pages and make them all your own terminology. So if we're dealing with certain people and they are expecting to see your logo from your company on there, and you want to put in certain things that mean, like, what's a life cycle? Some people may not know a life cycle is the same thing as a workflow. So you can put in your own verbiage that makes sense to your end users. It's going to be a nice way to streamline OnBase and not have to push out the entire client, but yet you can have a modified web client that you can provide by groups or by users. Some of the key features, as you'll see, we can have custom queries available, any of your workflows, your dashboards, and your document uploads. All those can be placed in a new App Builder solution, and then you can go with that and push it out to your end users so they have a URL to go to that's not necessarily the full-blown client. It does require OnBase 23.1. The awesome thing is that Hyland's not charging us an additional license for this. It's going to be part of your OnBase instance going forward. You just must be licensed for the OnBase web server and have a valid client license. If you do want to show any kind of reporting dashboards or use workflow, obviously you would have to be licensed for those as well. This is an example of what it looks like. One example of what it could look like, I should say. You can see here, I have a nice, easy, clean display. Doesn't really look like the OnBase that we're used to. It looks like a nice little clean, oh wow, this is a quick hit that I can go to and see really quickly my workflow queues. And I can see, like, emergency in progress, I got 3 docs to review. I can look at in progress, I got 20. You'll even see and notice the new HR assistance request and new missing document request. Those can launch custom queries for you, or can launch in a Unity form for you to use. This is a different layout, so it actually explains in the App Builder terminology. You have your card, which is at the very top. That's where we're putting everything in and around. So think of it like a container. You have your action tiles. This means you're going to go off and do something, whether that be run a custom query, maybe run a dashboard report. And then you have your actual source tiles. These take you into like workflow, so you can see what's going on in your particular queue, and you don't have to present the entire workflow to them, apply our entire life cycle. You can just do a queue specific. I'm kind of relating this to, in the Unity client, we have our personal page, and we kind of make our personal page the way we want to see it, but you still see the big ribbon bar up top that can be confusing for some people. This gives us a more cleaner web-based version of your personal page that you can then customize for your users, for a user or a user group. All right, let's take a look here. This is kind of a nice way to see, okay, look, I've got my workflow queues all off to the left. And then on the middle part, that's where I'm actually seeing my workflow inbox. And I can launch it from here and actually see the document and run my ad hoc tasks. So pretty simple, pretty easy. Really trying to make the screen before, it just was so compact with so many different things that we wanted to kind of clean this up a little bit. And Hyland's done a nice job of kind of giving us an intro into this new app builder. App builder is in 1.0 stage, or as Hyland likes to call it, 1.1. You can't do anything with WorkView just yet, but that is coming in future releases. So this is going to be expanding further and further and allow you to do a lot of different features and then have individual pages for specific users. So look for that. More development, more information around that coming soon. The next new thing is Hyland for Workday Extend. What does that mean? Well, we have new options here. Just as a disclaimer that the end user that uses Workday, they have to have the Extend version. That's not just the normal Workday version. It's another add-on, rather costly add-on, but it gives you a lot more power. And if you have that Workday Extend option, you literally have the ability then to bring new documents in. And what it's doing is it makes Workday look like it has true document management. In reality, it's calling OnBase, leaving all the heavy lifting of document retention, records management, all that inside of OnBase. So with this, you can see you can view a list of content, open OnBase documents up quickly, or just ingest a new document into OnBase, and the end user can stay in their interface that they're expecting and really know Workday. The next new thing is Outlook Web Add-in. So this is kind of neat because now we have the Outlook integration for the actual Outlook client itself. However, this option gives us the ability to do it via the webmail. As Microsoft's pushing more and more to go to the web clients. So now in the Outlook web client, you'll have the ability to import emails and attachments as a single email file. It's currently only doing manual keyword indexing. Autofills are coming soon. We're hopeful that those will be out in a new build coming in next month. We'll see when Hyland's ready to release those, but it's going to be hopefully there soon. And probably the biggest feature that we don't have today is a notification if an email's already been imported, so you don't have to worry about importing it again. So that's pretty neat. It is going to require 23.1. It does require that you have the Hyland IDP server set up, and so basically, if you're used to using single sign-on and not just Windows single sign-on, but actually some kind of SAML single sign-on, then that's what it's going to rely on. You can have a mixed system, but Hyland is slowly getting everybody up to speed and trying to push people into using the IDP and getting away from Windows security moving forward. The licensing is still be determined. Hyland hasn't decided if it's going to be part of the general package that you get or if it's going to be a new license altogether. We're still hoping to hear about that soon. They claim that it's going to be out soon. It's not officially released yet. I know that there are some beta testers out there that are using currently, and last I heard they were talking about December 2023 of releasing this officially. All right, module enhancements. I do want to encourage you, if you have questions, you're welcome to ask questions at any time. Here's a quick hit on the modules, and this is just some of the modules that got updated, but the OnBase capture side, web server had a ton of enhancements, and as we go forward, Hyland's going to put a lot of their R&D into the web server, trying to get people to go to more of a browser approach, much like a lot of other software vendors are doing, Microsoft, Google, Salesforce. That's the only way you have. So just keep that in mind. As you can see here, there's several things that we're going to talk about, but the web server is really the important one that they're going to be suggesting you move to. So let's talk about the capture. WriteFacts is now using the new web API. It was kind of outdated that they were using the old COM APIs for WriteFacts before. Now with the new web APIs, we have more flexibility and more functionality available to us so that we can interact with that. And so that's part of the WriteFacts connector. One of the biggest enhancements that Hyland came up with from the user community is adding index file headers to your dip files. Before, we would have, if we had any kind of column header, so like the first row was really your column headers of what is coming through. So like here's your doc type, and then the next column over would be your file to import, and then any keywords, if you will. Now you can have those headers, and you can tell OnBase to ignore those, which is really nice. So that should take away manual interaction with some of these files. And then the capture process designer had some enhancements, some inconsistencies have been updated, and they've added some more functionality that if you're using capture process designer now, you'll appreciate those. If you haven't, then welcome to capture process designer. It's a way to create a custom scan queue, if you will, so that you can then scan stuff in. It can send stuff to workflow and then come back into a scan queue. You have a lot of different options for using CPD. It's a matter of rolling your sleeves up and working with it. We will say that with CPD, you cannot use, if you're scanning with the old thick client, the old original OnBase client, CPD does not work with that. It is Unity specific. And the web client as well. So let's talk about the web. We have ability now to see awaiting and commit batches. Before, we could have to pull up the old thick client and go in and do that, or in the Unity client. Now you can do it in the web client. So it's really pretty cool. With document distribution and managing recipients, that has been kind of a pain in the past. Hyland has now exposed that to you in the web client. It's kind of cool. If you've ever had to go in and do anything with that, it can be cumbersome, and you're going to see more and more of that kind of feature added into the web client. As we start to see the thick client get sunsetted and deprecated, you're going to see that they're going to enhance the web client to do a lot. Then they got improved text report viewer, which is kind of nice too, and we'll see that in just a little bit. So here is the example of a screenshot with the ability to see the waiting commit, and then you can right click and mark a batch ready for commit. And you can go through and see the actual committed batches if you want as well. This functionality did not exist in the web client before. It's very nice that it can. They're trying to get more and more options for an OnBase administrator to live in a web client and not have to have multiple clients up. That's all a work in progress, but just FYI. A big enhancement was now that the web client responds to tablets and actual cell phones much better. So if you use that, you can have your touch gestures. So if you think about, if you want to take a screen and blow it up, you can literally pinch your fingers and spread them apart or pinch them together. Now the web client respects that versus thinking you're actually clicking on the actual screen. Also, we can do away with pop-ups now that everything can be done in a single window. So before, it was kind of annoying if you had to come in and click on something and you get to another document, it's going to potentially change into a new window, or if you had a pop-up come up that you needed to get to annotations, it brought up another window, so then you had cascading windows to deal with. All that can be modified now in one single window, and it's respective of your settings. And that can be changed on the preferences tab of a particular user, or you can set that organizational wide. And then you also have updated theming so that we can be more compliance. Here we are with the setting that we're talking about in the single window mode. So I went into the actual preferences and showed you right there, single user mode, enable single window mode, so that we can have that available to us. What does that look like? Here's an example. We can have at the top where you'd see where it come up and pop up in a multi-window mode. It was kind of annoying that you'd see some of this. Now we can do it in a single user mode where it's side by side. We can have everything right there.
What's really nice too, if you start talking about workflow or work views, those always open up a new window. Now you can have it all contained in one window and not worry about multiple pop-ups. The high contrast we were talking about, for some of us that are color challenged, if you will, the 22.1 and the 23.1 and changes are minimal, but for those that really need to rely on those to help them visually see those, you can definitely tell that they're working much harder to be compliant with the WCAG 2.1 AA guidelines. Speaking of that, did you guys know that in 22.1, the web client introduced a dark mode and a light mode? So you can have your normal, you can follow the OS settings, or you can specifically have this client in light or dark mode if you like. So let's talk about something here. This is probably the biggest update that Hyland has made inside of their core products in a long time, in my opinion. Working with PDFs, it's always been rough. It's been kind of difficult to deal with at times. As Adobe would push out new versions, depending on what your setting was within the client, you may run into issues and you have to deploy to an older version of Adobe, or you may have to then go in and reformat and change the setting to go from like a browser mode to what they call a Chromium mode, or vice versa. You have different things set up. Now Hyland's written their own native PDF viewer, which is awesome because now we can do text searching and selection of copy to clipboard. So you'll notice on the right hand side, we actually have the search for packet, and you can see how it highlighted it, packet and packet. If you ever use the cold and text viewer inside of OnBase, it does something similar, or even the full text version. If you're looking for something, it'll see that. We didn't have that option before, but now we can definitely do that. We can apply notes and annotations right on the document. Before, we could have a note, but it'd always be off to the side. Now, just like a TIFF image, you can do your annotations right there on the document itself. We can interact with bookmarks. You'll see on the left-hand side, there's bookmarks presented. Well, I can click on any of those bookmarks and it'll take me directly to that page where I need to be. And probably another cool thing is you can actually interact with hyperlinks. So as you click on a hyperlink, in this case, it's somebody's email, it'll pull up your email and then you can start typing away. Or if there's a link to another site, you can click on that, it'll take you to another site. So all these features are really cool. Getting in there and playing with this in the web client is great. And as we start seeing Hyland push more and more out, you're going to see in 24.1, they're adding more PDF features, and beyond is going to be treating PDFs a lot like they would TIFF images back in the day. One thing I should point out too is with adding annotations to a PDF, if you need to export that document out, let's say we're going to do right click, send to file, you can do that. And now with those PDFs and annotations, you can decide, do I want the annotations with the document, or do I want them to be with export the document without the annotations? Really cool stuff. Okay, workflow approval management. Not a lot of people use this. It's really a great tool. If you've never used it before, the background around this is it allows you to have kind of a dynamic workflow, meaning that in a traditional OnBase world, we would have workflows set up and we would say, okay, now you're gonna have to go into OnBase Studio. Somebody's got to be familiar with that. They're gonna have to then go in and set the privileges and so on and so forth. With what's officially known as WAM, Workflow Approval Management, you can set up rules so that a business owner can go in and say, okay, I typically want to review any invoices for a second review that's at $1,000 or more. Well, now I'm seeing the volume so high, they're pretty standard, they're coming with POs, we really don't have to do that. So now I can go in as an end user with privileges to WAM. I can go in and adjust that setting. So I say, okay, if it's a PO invoice, then I only want to approve it if it's over $5,000, thus reducing your volume that you'd have to approve. It's just different ways to do that. I'm saying that that person can do it for them, they can do it for others. It's just a different way of allowing you to have parameters at the user level when the business unit needs to have changes. Very common for if you have seasonal kind of work and you're doing the different things, we really like to have the WAM option available. So what does it look like? Well, it's also available now in the web where it wasn't before. So you can come through and as you can see in this scenario, invoices less than $1,000 are there. On the right hand side, there's the name, there's the description. who can do this, who can approve this. And you can see how we can set that up. We can adjust those numbers. So if we wanted to be less than $5,000 or whatever you want to do, you can adjust those right there on the fly. So new to the web client and also available to end users if you've never used WAM. OnBase Mobile, another area Hyland is putting in a lot of work and trying to make sure that as technology grows and people are adjusting to using their cell phones for everything, very rarely will we go out and not have our cell phone. A lot of times we do, we feel like we're missing something. If we don't have our cell phone, we're constantly looking for it. Sometimes we're even using our watches to find our cell phones because we're so connected to those things. So that being said, Hyland's done a lot of work on their mobile platform to try to bring this in. You'll notice that it has a different look and feel. It started in EP4, that it changed from the old broker to the new OnBase Mobile, and it's really enhanced a lot. And with 23.1, it's kind of cool because now you have improved experience for Unity forms. That before the Unity forms were kind of rendered the way they were, now they're actually rendering much better so that you can see them on an actual cell phone / tablet. You can even add in support for eForm and image forms, so you can create, view, and submit those all from the mobile device. Any kind of workflow suspended tasks, meaning like ad hoc tasks or anywhere that we're not just letting system process on its own and we actually have human interaction, we can do this now from the web client, from the mobile client. You can display Unity image and forms, you can create them, add notes, send to users in a load balance queue. So you're getting a lot more functionality now in the mobile than you've ever had before. So far, so good. Any questions?
Jack, it does look like we did have a few questions come in.
Okay.
So for OnBase 23.1, is Firefox a supported browser?
It is. Yep. Firefox has been supported for a while now, along with Chrome, Edge, Opera.
How about Safari?
Safari is available too, yes.
Great. And then as far as the app builder goes, Jack, I know you touched on it briefly, but do we know when WorkView support will come into play?
There is, I'm putting this in air quotes because Hyland has their huge disclaimers about what's going to be available and what's not. If they can get it in, they were saying at CommunityLive, they're trying to get WorkView, the ability to do WorkView in the app builder in 24.1, which will be released in Q1. They didn't know if it'd be ready then. It's more than likely going to be one of the service releases that come out after that. And it may not make it to 25.1 depending on what they run into. I will say that if people aren't familiar with it, WorkView has its own web client. And if you haven't experienced that, that's a nice way of not having to push out all of OnBase to everybody else as well. Use that WorkView web client, and then you can kind of scale down what people need to see. They don't have to see all this other retrieval and workflow stuff. But the other cool thing about the WorkView web client is you can have more than one WorkView app running and see that at a time. Whereas in the Unity client, or the web client currently, you're gonna see one app at a time.
Gotcha. Great. And then finally, Jack, is there any training or documentation available for CPD yet?
There is. There's actually in the premium subscription training, there is available training for the CPD, and there is documentation on it. There's the MRG, and I'm going to show you some new documentation that Hyland has out pretty soon, or they already have it out, but I'll show you in the upcoming slide of the documentation.
Great. And then, Jack, we did have one final question that came in regarding PDF annotations.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know if these are stored as OnBase annotations or are they embedded into the actual PDF itself?
We were told, we didn't have it confirmed, but we asked that question at CommunityLive. We were told that they are stored as OnBase annotations. That way, they had to do it that way so that if you wanted to export this PDF out, you could do so without the annotations, or you could include them.
And so these are set up like traditional annotations in OnBase?
Yes.
Perfect.
That's what we're told from the product manager. We asked those specific questions, so those are good questions at CommunityLive.
Great, thanks, Jack.
You bet. Okay, let's jump to this next one. AP automation for SAP, there's a lot of updates to this. We have a whole webinar in this, so I won't spend a lot of time other than just one screen. It basically says, now you have support for service order entry sheets, bank account details. You can pass those to SAP, whereas before you couldn't. And then capturing holding tax and passing it to SAP. You know, with holding tax is a big one. There's a lot of times we run into issues when our Unity forms, when we're passing stuff back and forth via SAP. There's always before certain values that you could and couldn't pass. And now more and more is getting exposed. And as Hyland moves on and they have more and more customers adopt SAP, and especially some of the new features in SAP, you're going to see a lot more development around that. All right, integration for Salesforce. If you haven't seen it lately, Salesforce 3.0, or the integration for Salesforce 3.0, you have the ability to see a new data grid. So you can see it now, and you can have that, so you can filter, you can do sequential, you can actually do the normal filtering you would expect to see, as well as on the left-hand side, you see that we have the ability to have filter features, so we can say contains and all the other options that you see there. It's getting more and more look and feel of truly being built into Salesforce and looks like an extension of Salesforce, when in reality, we're storing our documents in OnBase. Multiple reasons why you don't want to store them in OnBase versus leaving in Salesforce. Number one reason we hear quite often is people don't understand or don't realize that Salesforce charges you for storage of these documents. So if you start making Salesforce act like a document management system, your costs are going to increase exponentially. If you keep them in OnBase, you don't have that extra storage cost. Then you can use all the features of OnBase to do records management, to make sure you're storing things properly at a certain time, and all the other features you get with OnBase. Now you have the ability to do a print and download. So it's nice that you see these two little buttons pop up at the top. You can now do that. Before you didn't have that luxury, now you do. There's 3.01 that's out that has a backup restore tool. Why is that important? So I mentioned before that you could take documents out of work, out of Salesforce, excuse me, and put them into OnBase. So let's say you're doing that, you're testing it, you want to go back and do it again. This backup restore tool gives you that ability to push them back and forth between OnBase and Salesforce. So it's kind of nice. One of the biggest things that I'm really excited about is the export, import, and configuration mappings. If you've ever had to go through and do any of these inside of Salesforce, you're doing the mapping of, okay, what's the Salesforce attribute compared to what's the OnBase keyword and or doc type, and so on and so forth. And if you're doing a lot of different ones, there's a lot. And before, it was a manual. Okay, set it up and test. I got it working the way I wanted. Now I have to go over and replicate that same thing. Well, that violated a lot of our change control policies that we have out there in certain organizations. Now we can export that configuration out and import that in, not worry about human error upon having a typo or missing a particular keyword. And then from the end user perspective, they really like the ability now that we can have autofill keyword sets. Autofills are a huge benefit and helps us to index documents much more quickly. Rolling right along, platform updates. So there's 4 areas where there's been a lot of enhancements done: the administration portal, REST APIs, the third-party compatibility, and the Hyland IDP. Let's go into it. The administration portal, you may or may not have heard about it. It was introduced in 22.1. It gives you the ability to go out and do some of the configuration items without having to bring up the old configuration client. Now it gives you a web-based option. You can access this either via OnBase Studio. If you have it set up, it's like setting up a new website, if you will, but it's really just a pointer to a certain section so that you can get to some of that, as well as you can do it straight from a URL. You can see now that we have the ability to do some user groups, metadata configuration, and some of your system settings. What does that really mean? Well, here's what it looks like. This is in dark mode, but you can see how we got it set up. Now we have the default privileges that are there. Before we could add users, we could add keywords, but we couldn't necessarily do key type groups and different things. You have a lot more exposed to you. As you can see, everything was here on this screen. And as we go through, there's even more. And so all of this wouldn't fit on one screen, so we gave you 2 different screenshots to see that there's a lot to it that's out there. If you don't like firing up the old configuration and you have users that maybe they're just managing users and user groups, so they're like a system group administrator, or maybe they are responsible for only being a liaison for a certain department. So instead of actually putting in an IS request and asking somebody to come into Studio or to configuration rather and make these changes to a doc type, adding a certain keyword or something, you can actually do it now if given them proper privileges. REST APIs, these are being extended a lot more so we can actually retrieve information from uniforms, especially. A lot of times we could do things by keywords, but actual data on the uniform is now being more accessible to us via the REST APIs. You'll see that we can have the ability to get to history now for documents and workflows and doing security keywords as a user in a user group. That's huge. Before, we couldn't necessarily do that, so we were no longer respecting the security keywords by user or group that was out there. So just know that a lot of the REST API enhancements in this round were around a lot of the configuration items, but these are the main ones that are out there for us from the end user side. Moving right into the third-party compatibility, now supports TLS 1.3, so any of our app servers and all those that have a URL, we can now support 1.3, and likewise, it's been upgraded to .NET 4.8. It's the .NET Framework 4.8, leverages the latest and final version of Microsoft .NET framework that's available. We have a lot of more around the REST APIs. There's certain things that are happening and they're building them out. Look for a lot of development in three main areas that we're seeing and hearing from Hyland. One is the web client. Two is this information around REST APIs. And then three is around integrations like with Salesforce. Those are hot and heavy on their list to make sure that they're putting in a lot of R&D effects. If you're not aware, the Hyland IDP, it's really more of an access manager, but it's called IDP. Just to let you know, Hyland has also come out with another Hyland IDP, and that stands for Intelligent Document Processing. That's using an industry term. This is more of an identification provider, so that's the same acronym used for different things. Just an FYI. And you'll see that 23.1, you're going to be required to use IDP 4.0. As we go through, it is backwards compatible, which is important to know. They're doing this any new customers or any upgrades you're doing with the Hyland Cloud, you will definitely see that this is out there and they're going to be forced to use this. It's kind of good because it used to be we had to pass certain things back and forth. We had to work with the customer's IT group, and the IT group would then send stuff over to us in XML file. Then we would have to work with Hyland on the cloud to get their team to do certain things. Then that came along to where we could do a lot of it interaction without Hyland. And now this is getting us even further and further, so that we're going to be more of a self-serve kind of a solution when it comes to setting up SSO. Not 100% self-serve yet, but we're getting closer. So speaking of that, available to all customers. If you haven't been out there, the Hyland University, this particular class, and it's really just a hands-on lab, is about setting up the OnBase administration portal. This is a really good class to go through with this hands-on lab to get your hands on it and get the feel for it. Now, granted, you don't necessarily go in and do a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff that you would for SAML. You're still going to need somebody that has experience with that, but this will give you the OnBase side of it to look at and work with. And as the note says there is some special pricing going on for premium subscription right now. Definitely reach out to your account manager if you're interested. If you don't know what premium subscription is, Hyland University has some free classes out there that you can go to. They're at your high level of what is the Unity client, those kind of things. But then if you use the premium subscription, that's where you can get in and see some of these hands-on labs, get into more detail than in just a 10 to 30 minute overview where you're watching somebody talk and watching them click around. This actually gives you some background information, fires up a VM for you that you can connect to and run a lab exercise through. So we encourage people, if you're trying to learn more about OnBase, and really if you're saying, oh, would this module or this new feature make sense for me? Go out, look at it on the premium subscription, see what it does. and get your hands on it, touch it, and then say, okay, I might like to do that. Another option is the try.hyland.com. If you're interested in more opportunities for that, just reach out to your account manager and make sure you're taking full advantage of what's available to you out on Community. Okay. Hyland has a new documentation portal, and that's your support.hyland.com. But do know that MRGs are around, but they're going to be slowly being phased out, and everything's going to go to online documentation. Just FYI, I will say this new documentation is very nice with respect to you can filter it really quickly. If you're not using OnBase and using something else, there are other options out there, but right now they have version 22 and version 23 documentation. We like to go out there sometimes for the database settings, so it can say, okay, what are my ideal settings if I'm running SQL Server for OnBase? Are there any new options I should be looking at for 23.1 that may not existed in 22.1 or previous versions? So there's all kinds of things you can come in here and see. Whatever you'd see in MRG, you can now see right here online, real time. This also allows, doing it this way, allows Hyland to make updates. So before, if they had a PDF of your MRG, then, and there was some kind of issue with it, they may not be able to quickly come back and update that, and it may never get updated until the next release, if then. Now, Hyland has the ability to make updates real time. So if they had a typo, or if they had some information they learned, oh, we really should have phrased it a different way, they can update it, and everybody will see the updates immediately. Moving on. I should pause there. Jack Pompey, do we have any questions before I move on?
Actually, Jack, yes, we did have a couple new questions come in. First, I want to learn more about Salesforce integration. Would premium subscription be a good place to start?
There is. That premium subscription is a good place to start. For me, depends on what you're trying to learn about it. Are you trying to learn the user aspect of it, or are you trying to learn how to set it up with OnBase? Because that's going to be the key descriptor.
It looks like they want to learn more about how it would work in their specific environment.
So on that one, you can go to premium subscription, but for me, I would opt to do more of like one of the try.hyland.com and work with their account manager and get a demo set up, because then doing it that way, you can actually put your hands on it and touch it and feel it and see what it looks like.
Great, great. Jack, it looks like we had another question come in about WriteFax. Is the WriteFax connector a better option than using that traditional USB fax to fax into a folder and then sweep it into OnBase?
That's sometimes a personal preference. A lot of times we need more detail. I like doing the connector that way, simply because then with the new APIs and stuff, we're getting the latest of everything from WriteFax, and we can get more detail. For instance, if we do a sweep with WriteFax, a lot of times if we put it into a directory and then we have OnBase sweep those files in, if you needed to get any of the information, like what was the original number it came from, how many pages did WriteFax show that it had, all that information is available to you, but you would have to go back and then do a lookup into the WriteFax system to be able to get that information. Now with the new web APIs, you can set this up and you can glean more information than you could before without having to go back and do a lookup.
Perfect. Thanks, Jack.
Sure thing. Good to go?
Good to go.
Okay. Well, let's talk about what we learned in CommunityLive 2023. So OnBase 24.1 will be released in Q1 of 2024. Hyland said they were shooting for mid to late February. That is pretty aggressive considering that 23.1 came out last month. I anticipated being closer to mid to late March, but Hyland has a goal. They need to have a goal. They have the goals. Let's see what happens. That then starts a new cadence of releases. Q1 of each new year, they'll start releasing out the new version of OnBase. So the next 25.1 will be released in Q1 of 2025, so on and so forth. Monthly patches will be available for the current release only, and then security patches will only be released for one previous version. So in our case, since 23.1 is out, 22.1 is out, and really we'll only have security updates coming out soon. So just FYI. App control. This is probably the coolest thing that I've seen come out, and it's not really a Hyland product. It was actually a group of users who came up with this, and it's really nice and cool. So let's talk about it. App control is really kind of a new concept. Sometimes processing everything in a queue, for instance, is inefficient and not currently possible. Like you need to work over a set of documents, not all objects that reside in a queue. So if you're looking at a queue and it has 5,000 documents in it, for instance, and really you're looking for only a subset to be able to run, say, your timer against, that isn't always the most efficient way, because it's going to have to iterate through all 5,000 before it finds the ones we really need. So with this, is going to give you a way to shortcut that and not have to go through all those documents. It also is probably the biggest thing I like about it is you can keep all your critical configuration values in one place, and it makes changing and administration much easier. If you need to kind of keep track of what process needs to run and when did it last run, you can actually do so and keep that kind of like if you've ever went to the Unity console, management console, when you're configuring timers, you can see when it ran and when was the last time it ran, how many did it process. Well, that's okay if you have to go there and pull that up every time, but not all users have access to that. So you can set up a nice little workview license, or I'm sorry, workview application to toll these things. It does require at least one workview license, but then you can store everything right here. The need behind this is, if you think about it, if you first start setting up an OnBase system, it's nice and manageable, right? We can easy to understand. We don't have 1,000 workflows in there. We may not have hundreds and hundreds of workview applications. And we normally don't start out with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of users. But as time moves on, the solution grows. People leave. So then you're like losing some of your intellectual property of where that went and what it's about. This is where you need to be able to find out quickly and where to go. How many times we thought about different things about hard coding in. So if you have like some kind of, let's say, a docpop URL and you want it to go out, well, if you have a docpop URL, you're hard coding that value inside of your workflow, for instance. With this, you can have one basically control screen, and that one control screen will allow you to say, okay, here's my docpop, and I can take that docpop and let's say I'm getting a new server, and it's going to be a new web server that I'm standing up. Well, I can do that. I can go in, update that configuration, and the beauty of it is you don't need to have cache reset. It can happen right there on the fly as soon as you save the object. So here's 6 examples. If you're putting in email addresses for recipients, email subjects, all that, anywhere in text that you might put in workflows, a static that you may have people come and go, so they're no longer in a department, they may not be in the company anymore. You have to go find the particular workflows that they're in, potentially remove those if you're hard coding those in. Now, if you go through and use a workview app to control all that, you have one place to go. You don't have to go to all these different notifications and find them. I mentioned URLs. This is great for going through and having URLs updated on the fly. If you're moving from potentially test to prod, you have to go through and make sure you're reconfiguring all that and adding out all that in. So if you had multiple workflows that had different URLs provided, you got to go all over the place, and you got to know each one to do and where to go find it. Doing it this way, you have a main configuration screen, and you can change it all in one place quickly and easily. You can adjust your timers, how fast they need to run. You can change all kinds of different values with that. If you're bringing in bulk processes of images and dealing with those, definitely a good option. And I'm gonna give you some examples here coming up soon. It allows you to have some different scheduling processes. So if you have a Unity scheduler, but that schedule is gonna run, and you set it to run every day, let's say, every day for every 5 minutes. But in reality, you're doing seasonal work. And so maybe in September, I need this to run every 5 minutes every day. But then as we go through, because everything I process is going to be in Q4, so September, October, November, December, those areas, I need to make sure that my timer runs more frequently than, let's say, January, February, March, when Q1, then I can adjust that and not have to go into anything into Unity Manager Console and make the adjustments there. I can come to the configuration screen, and then it'll respect my new attributes that I put in. And then also it can be used to find missing data for data integrity. So I'll kind of give you some examples. This is an example of just a very generic looking form that's created in WorkView. You can say, okay, what's the control type? In this case, we're talking about a configuration. And you can have a control item. You see these are very generic names because you're trying to use 1 or 2 or 3 max actual workview classes to say, let's control all this. So as you go through, the top image shows you kind of here's what we can do. It's your base URL we want to work with. We want to add an action message to it we can. But on the right-hand side, the control value text, that's important because now I can come in and adjust that value. So I say, okay, I'm switching it up and changing it to a new actual server that I want it to go off of. So I can spin up a new server and not have to go out and then wait till everybody's out, reset the cache. I can't tell you how many times we run through that, especially if things are load balanced, letting everything fall out of one, then switch over to the other. This is instantaneous. So once you come in, you make this change, you hit save, that object is updated. And in your workflow, if you look at the bottom diagram, you can see where we're getting that base URL from the workview object. So as soon as it's saved, now I'm able to work with that. I don't make any changes within my actual workflow setup because I did it all in my control screen. So this gives you a lot of power of going in and not touching all these different areas of actions to know, especially if you have hundreds of workflows, you can have this one action in there a lot. And you can spend a lot of time going in and do a find. And you got to hope that you put the same verbiage in there, like look for the word URL, for instance, and try to find all those things. This is a nice way to narrow it down. Okay. We can talk to you more about app control. There's a whole lot more to it than what we have here. I just want to save time for questions at the end. But just FYI, reach out to your account manager. We can set up a time to talk about pros and cons and does that make sense for you and your environment. Moving right along, there's new web UI framework. It's a new portal option. Hyland touted this new lightweight portal that's totally developed by Hyland that allows us to have a replacement for the old external access client, meaning that I can come in and interact with my vendors or HR onboarding. So they may not already have an OnBase user account, and all we need to do is give them a way to transfer files back and forth. So there are things that you could force them to have an OnBase user account for. That's still doable if you're going to do something where a person needs to have a license for OnBase and have a client to retrieve documents. But if you want them just to upload documents, if you're putting documents out on a portal that they just need to click on to receive, you can do that. As you see here, we got a video we can play, and you can make it all your own custom look and feel. Some of the common examples I've touched on are HR onboarding, contract management, so we can have a secure portal to transfer docs, and then AP, you can get your vendors to sign up this way so that you have all their information instead of somebody on your side typing it in. Have the vendors come in, put that in, and upload their W-9 so you have it all so you can start working with them. Just some sample screens that you can see. These screens are all self-configurable, is what we really like. So Hyland's trying to make it more and more where things are self-serve. We can start taking care of ourselves. Here you can see a login screen. You can put in your logo and your company name where it says sign into Hyland Industries. On the right-hand side, you can let them sign up for an account, and then you can even set up a workflow behind the scenes if you want to automatically approve it or if you want to go through an approval process. Dark mode is supported inside this new web portal, which is great. You can see DKT is here. Anything that I need to do with DKT, I can now expose it to this portal, which is great. As you can see, here's an example of a new hire onboarding situation that we want them to see. Here's our no smoking policy. A vendor could come out here and have to go through the vendor code of ethics if you want. All those kind of things are available to you. It's all up to you and your discretion. You can create and build your own pages. So before we were going through, and anytime we wanted to adjust everything, we were going through status view and doing portlets, and it was kind of kludgy and cumbersome of what we could and couldn't add. We didn't have exposure to a lot, but we had exposure to certain ways of doing things. Now we can build our own pages. We can design them however we want. And you don't have to be a web designer to do this. You can go through, as you can see, it's a lot of point and click. You obviously want to have some idea of what you want the page to look like. So we always, just like workflow, recommend kind of drawing it out, saying what you want to see and do, but it's all available to you that you can set up yourself. Even the themes, you can set up the themes to match your company colors. And then the last thing I'll talk about with this is you have the ability to upload documents. As you can see, I can drag and drop onto this widget, or if I click on the widget, it'll bring up my import screen and I can find it for us. That's what we have. All right. We are 5 minutes before the thing's up, so I just want to ask any questions and answers or questions at this time.
Jack, it looks like we had two come in. Where can I find more information on the web UI?
That is available on Community. There's a section on page to that about the web UI. If you're not finding it quickly or easily, reach out to your account manager and we can help you find that and point you in the right direction. And we can even set up a custom demo if you need to see it.
Perfect.
It is a separate license, I should say. So it doesn't come if you're already on the new simplified pricing. It doesn't come with that. It is a separate license that you do have to have.
And then finally, Jack, are the new PDF enhancements in OnBase 23.1 backwards compatible with the PDFs that are already in OnBase?
Yes, it is simply version specific. So as long as you're on 23.1 with the new web server and web client, you are good to go.
Perfect. Thanks, Jack.
Okay, as we wrap up here, thank you all for your time. Just know that our next webinar is going to be on RPA, robotic process automation. If you'd like to see other topics, please email us at salesAdmin@tsc-ecm.com. We really appreciate your time. If you have any questions or if you're looking for somebody to be a managed services partner for OnBase, that's another offering we have. We'd love to talk to you about that and how we can help augment your OnBase administration duties. And with that, we thank you for attending. Have a great day, everyone.